This is the Steam Deck 2. How's it going, everyone, and welcome to Deck Ready, the channel all about the Steam Deck. A couple of videos back, I talked about my thoughts on the Steam Deck after using it for about 3 months, maybe a little more, and I came down extremely positive on this thing. I absolutely love it from top to bottom. I've had so much fun playing it, and since I did that video, I went back home to my family's house in Michigan, and I played through Alan Wake on the Steam Deck, and honestly, it was an incredible experience. So as sort of a counter to that video, for today's video, I thought it'd be fun if I came up with what I would want to see if Valve or when Valve makes a Steam Deck 2. Because there are some areas where this thing definitely could be improved, even though as a first gen product, it is pretty damn good. So the first thing I really want to see in a Steam Deck 2 is 100, 1000, 1,000,000% an OLED screen. I've actually been playing a little bit on my Switch OLED the past few weeks as well, because I wanted to play through Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, and I also picked up Pokemon Arceus Legends, and I never really got around to it. And I know you can emulate these games on the Steam Deck, but I already bought them, so I was like, I'll just play it on my Switch OLED. And yeah, going back and forth between those screens, the OLED screen on the Switch is just that good. It reminds me of when the Vita came out, and I was going back and forth between the 3DS and the Vita OLED edition, and I was like, this is just absolutely night and day. Now, thankfully, on the Steam Deck, the LCD screen that is on the device already is pretty bright on its own, and it reproduces color super well, but no matter how good an LCD screen is, it's not going to be as good as like the worst OLED screen, and Nintendo actually used a pretty decent one in the Switch. So yeah, in the future, I would be more than happy if that higher tier premium option that you can get for the Steam Deck, instead of having just anti-glare glass and a better case, also came along with more premium options like maybe an OLED screen. The resolution of 800p I feel like is totally fine, because that's the big drawback of the Nintendo Switch. You have a 720p OLED screen on the unit, but there aren't very many games that are hitting 720p or even holding a steady frame rate. That is the trade-off that we get on the Steam Deck, where we have an LCD screen, but you can run most games at 800p, keep a solid frame rate, and mostly have a pretty good time with it. Also, just continuing on with the screen from a hardware perspective, I would absolutely love it if they could get the bezels a little bit smaller. That is another really cool thing on the Nintendo Switch OLED, how much they were able to reduce the bezels between the Redbox one and then this one, and even the Switch Lite. Like, the bezels on the Switch OLED look so much better than all of the other Switch models, and it's not really that big of a deal. It just looks nicer having seen it, and going back to the Steam Deck, I'm kind of like, yeah, I would like to see smaller bezels on a future device. And just overall, if they could shrink down the device just a little bit more. I know the footprint is totally manageable, and I see a lot of people complain about it when they compare it to the Nintendo Switch, but really a lot of people who would be potential buyers of the Steam Deck use a Satisfy grip with their Switch, which makes it roughly the same size as a Steam Deck anyway. But yeah, at the end of the day, I would like to see them decrease the size while also keeping the nice ergonomics that are already there on the Steam Deck. But if that trade-off needed to sacrifice thinner bezels to get there, I don't think I would want it. I would take thinner bezels and an OLED screen over a smaller overall chassis, because I like how durable and sturdy the Steam Deck feels compared to the Switch. After playing on the Steam Deck, going back to my Switch OLED, it feels just a little too creaky for how I like it. And also the Joy-Con rattles just makes it feel a little bit cheap, if you know what I'm saying. This next thing I would like to see is a little bit weird, because it could potentially come to the Steam Deck proper that we already have now at any time, but we don't have it right now. So just looking to the future, one thing I would really like to see in an iteration of the Steam Deck is FSR 2.0 at the OS level. Now, FSR 2.0, if you guys haven't messed around with it yet in games that support it, like God of War and Deathloop, it's a big improvement over FSR 1.0. And yeah, I have a gaming PC at home that has an NVIDIA graphics card. So yeah, basically I use DLSS in every game I play, because these days that's more of a required feature instead of something you'd use if you have an underpowered PC, because, you know, developers love releasing games 80% done lately. It's awesome. But jumping between FSR and DLSS, it's not even really a contest specifically with 1.0 and DLSS. Like, even at ultra performance, DLSS generally looks a lot better than FSR 1.0 does on the Steam Deck. FSR 2.0, on the other hand, is a pretty solid improvement. I'd say it's noticeably better. It doesn't actually seem to provide better frame rates than the 2 games I've tested it with, but overall visual quality is much improved with FSR 2.0. Is it as good as DLSS? I don't think so personally, but I've definitely tested way more games on DLSS than I have FSR, so I feel like that one's more up in the air. But after seeing the improvement, I would really like that OS level FSR that the Steam Deck has to be upgraded to 2.0, and I think it would probably be pretty easy because I have seen so many posts on the subreddit over the past few weeks where people are modding FSR 2.0 into games that only support 1.0, like Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, which would be a great game to have FSR in because you could run it at 40 Hertz and 40 frames per second at original and high settings versus 30 frames per second at the same settings. Now, unfortunately, one thing I don't think is ever going to improve at the OS level FSR is UI and text. So when you use the built-in Steam Deck FSR, it's basically applying it to the entire game. So the entire game is running at a lower resolution and then being upscaled. So text, HUD elements, they get a little bit of jaggies around their edges, and that doesn't look all that great versus using FSR in an actual game. It keeps those elements the same resolution as your screen, which stops that jaggedness from even happening. I don't really know how Valve could figure out a way to fix that on their own, but if they could, they're pretty smart over there at Valve, if you guys didn't know. I would love to see that improvement come to the Steam Deck's OS as well. Another thing I'd really like to see revised on a Steam Deck 2 is the back buttons. As far as placement goes, these things are pretty much perfect. I have virtually zero complaints about that. I never, like 0 times ever, have hit them accidentally and screwed myself up in a game, and you can just turn them off if you're not someone who uses them regularly. So if you do hit them with your finger by accident, it's not going to totally screw you up, which is nice. The issue is I have played with a bunch of different controllers that have these back buttons. I've used a PlayStation 5 one, I've used a DualShock 4, I've used an Xbox Elite Series 1 and Series 2, and I gotta say Scuf has the best implementation of all the controllers I've tried. I like the paddles, I think they work pretty well, but they stopped working as well over time on the Elite Series 2. The way Scufs work is they're like little toggle switches that you don't ever hit unless you're really trying to, and it just feels good when you flick your finger across them versus having to hunt down those buttons that the Steam Deck already has. This one could be controversial, but there's a way to make it not controversial. I would really either A, like to see the USB port move to the bottom of the device like a Nintendo Switch, or B, have an extra USB-C port added altogether. Having it on top, I think, is good for when you're playing the actual Steam Deck because depending on where you're sitting, right, you can keep the cord in front of you and then put it out the top of the device, and then you don't have it hanging down and like touching your hands or anything like that, which is nice if you get annoyed by that stuff like I do. But also on the Nintendo Switch, it works the same way, pretty much having it on the bottom, and then you can hold it with the cord hanging down and it also won't brush your hand. I personally just like having that USB-C slot on the bottom, and where that would also come in super handy is with a dock. That is one of the coolest features of the Nintendo Switch, just being able to drop it in that dock carefully so you don't scratch the bottom right corner of the screen, and then it just shows up on your TV. That would be really useful on the Steam Deck as well if they just added in a second USB-C port and made a new dock where you could just drop the Steam Deck in, have it right in front of you, and everything's good. I'm fine with the solution they have now where you just put it on more of a stand that has ports in it and then you flip up a little USB-C cable. It just doesn't feel as premium as what we have on the Nintendo Switch, and this is, again, something I really wouldn't be complaining about if I didn't have experience with this other way that I personally just think is better. Sticking with the dock as an accessory, another accessory I would love to see Valve create in-house and release alongside a Steam Deck 2 or potentially even earlier is a gaming headset or at least a pair of headphones. I don't understand how the Steam Deck speakers are as good as they are. For a stereo device, it just seems crazy that they're as loud and clear and have as much range as they do. And I know I'm a little bit biased because this channel is all about the Steam Deck, but I'm being real. When I tried that thing out for the first time, I was really impressed with the audio quality. And again, playing Alan Wake while I was on vacation, there's a lot of stuff going on with the audio in that. There's a lot of sound effects, there's like music that swells up and kind of gets quieter in the background based on what's happening in the game. There's a bunch of cool effects that happen when you're shooting the flashlight at the Taken, and there's like all these little background noises that I didn't notice the first time I played this game. So knowing that and hearing in a Linus Tech Tips video that the headphones that come come along with a Valve Index are also that good. I think it's time for Valve to jump in this headset ring and really show us what they can do with a gaming headset. It would be awesome if they made it work with both the Index and the Steam Deck so that you could plug it into the Steam Deck or also have a Bluetooth connection as well to use with the Index. I know you could plug it into the Index, but I love these headsets that are coming out, like the new Sony InZone headsets that also come along with a dongle, and then you can connect those to your PC and get your PC audio, but at the same time you can connect them to the Bluetooth on your phone and blast through your Apple Music or Spotify. I would love to see a similar feature like that from Valve on their very own headset, because when I'm using a device like the Steam Deck, I would love to have an officially branded accessory to go along with it. I know it's kind of like antithetical to the whole PC thing, but when I had my Vita 1.0, Sony released these really awesomely good $20 earbuds that were like made for the PlayStation Vita, and I used those for pretty much the entire lifetime of the console because they went together in my head. They looked really good when I pulled them out of the case, and I was like, yeah, these are my Vita headphones and they live in the Vita case. So I would really like to have a similar thing for the Steam Deck. Next, I think the Steam Deck 2 needs to improve the trackpads. I had the Steam controller, I bought it when it went on fire sale alongside all of the accessories, and when you compare the trackpad or touchpad, however you want to say it, on that thing to the Steam Deck, it is night and day. The Steam Deck's trackpads are much better than the Steam controller, but there is still definitely room for improvement. I think they're just a little too plastic-y feeling, a little too hollow. If they could increase the quality of the plastic, get the haptics on par with maybe something like the DualSense, that would be incredible. And yeah, sticking with that, the Steam Deck 2 needs to improve the vibration motor. I know Valve has said that they did some research and that was like the least important thing to focus on to them, but I have a PlayStation channel as well. I use the DualSense with the games that support it, like Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, and when you move from the DualSense back to a regular controller, it's noticeable, but when you move from the DualSense to the vibration motors that you have on the Steam Deck, it is so noticeable that I kind of just want to turn it off on the Steam Deck. But the DualSense kind of finds the perfect middle ground, and having something similar in the Steam Deck would be awesome. And that's another way where they would just totally blow Nintendo out of the water. I remember when I got my first Nintendo Switch and they had to do a bunch of patches to the Joy-Cons because when you would play stuff like 1-2 Switch, the vibration would be so loud that it would overpower the speakers on your TV. You would hear this like wee noise whenever it was spinning up. And the Steam Deck is nowhere near that bad, but still, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of the trackpad quality on the Steam Deck 2. They're good enough right now, but I think we could get them better. This is another one on the software side of things that I know is extremely challenging, but Valve made the Steam Deck, so I think they could probably figure this out. I want them to improve Bluetooth sound on the Steam Deck so you don't have any latency. That is probably the best feature of using an iPhone with AirPods or a Mac with AirPods or an iPad with AirPods. You don't have any latency when you're watching a movie or a TV show or a YouTube video. My favorite headphones that I keep in my pockets at all times, like I check for these things when I leave the house every morning, are my Beats Fit Pros. They're easy to connect to other devices on top of your iPhone or your Android. So yeah, I'd love to be able to connect them to my Steam Deck and use them with games without getting latency in the sound. I was so excited when years after it came out, the Nintendo Switch got updated to support Bluetooth audio, and then I tried it out with my AirPods and I was like, oh, this has just as bad latency as my gaming PC, and I never thought about doing that again. Because even if you want to look for wired earbuds at this point, they're kind of hard to find, and if you want really good wired earbuds that aren't gonna cost you an arm and a leg, those are even harder to find. So let's just split the difference, improve the Bluetooth quality on SteamOS, and make that latency disappear. I think Valve can do it. After that, let's talk about games. So the game that launched alongside the Steam Deck to kind of show you how it works is Aperture Desk Job. It's kind of like on par with something like 1-2 Switch, except it's free and you don't have to pay for it. It's got that signature Valve high level of quality, even though it's a 30-minute experience. I like that it expanded the Portal universe though. So yeah, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. Honestly guys, I think Valve could do a lot better. I don't think there's any reason really why Valve has not even teased in any way some sort of game that's best on Steam Deck. I would love to play something new in the Half-Life universe like we got on VR with Half-Life Alyx that you can play on the Steam Deck. Now I know there's been tons and tons and tons of leaks of this new game called Citadel they're working on, or at least internally titled Citadel, and that's basically gonna be like a hybrid game where it's PC players against or working with VR players. It's not exactly clear at this point, but long story short, I would love to see some sort of experience made with the Steam Deck in mind, because any game that they make for the Steam Deck is gonna run great on a regular old gaming PC, but if they make it with the Steam Deck in mind and kind of take the Nintendo philosophy, they could get a game that looks and plays really well on the handheld, but also when you scale it up, looks just as good. Like Monster Hunter Rise, for example. It works way better on the Steam Deck than it does on the Nintendo Switch, and it works way better on a regular old gaming PC than it does on the Steam Deck. There's a great hierarchy there because that game started as a handheld game. And the last thing I would like to see with the Steam Deck 2 is more of a unification with some of the parts inside the thing, specifically the fan. I don't think it's bad enough to really complain all that much about, but it is kind of weird that there were two different fans you could get in the Steam Deck, and one of them was much quieter. It honestly brings me back to when the PlayStation 5 launched and we figured out that there's a quieter fan with more blades that ships with some PS5s, and it's a total crapshoot on which one you get. And knowing how loud the Steam Deck can get when the fans really start spinning, to the point where they basically had to adjust the fan curve and let the device run a lot hotter to get the fans to not spin up as much, I would just like it if all of the Steam Decks were able to have a quieter fan in them. Now, again, not gonna come down too hard on Valve for this one, because the reason they're probably using different fans is because of the dreaded evil supply chain issues that everyone hates hearing about. But still, it is kind of annoying that my first Steam Deck had the good fan, that my second Steam Deck, which was the one I pre-ordered, had the bad fan, and then I guess like fortunately that one broke and the third Steam Deck I got had the good fan. So that was like a nice recalibration. And also they got to figure out the screen bleed on the Steam Deck. I have gone through 3 Steam Decks at this point, as I just mentioned. All 3 of them have had screen bleed to some degree. The newest one I have, I thought didn't have it at all, but it just has much less screen bleed than the second Steam Deck I had, which had a horrendous screen bleed in the top corner. So yeah, for the Steam Deck 2, I think it's fair to say that all of us would like a little bit more quality control, and also I think they should stop using FedEx, because there are so many posts on the subreddit about FedEx employees stealing people's Steam Decks. I mean, when you look at the box, you know exactly what it is. It'd be pretty easy to just walk away with that thing. You know what I mean?